a great pregnancy, no problems at all. William was thriving and growing and jolly and bouncy and beautiful. William had an MMR at 15 months, and from then on, he, for want of a better word, he disintegrated.
The MMR jab combines 3 childhood vaccines against measles, mumps and rubella into one injection, which is first given at around 12 to 18 months. It has virtually eradicated these diseases from the UK. Throughout the world, it saved hundreds of lives. But shortly after her son had the jab, Rosemary noticed a change in his behaviour.
He stopped using the beginning of words, so book became ook and ball became all. And then over the next 12 months, those words just dissolved, and the very last word that he had was juice. He developed a raging thirst, and juice became oos, and oos became oo, and then it went completely.
Hey.
William!
William now has no language and severe learning difficulties. And he also suffers from recurring bowel problems, which started at the same time as his first signs of autism and just after the MMR. Rosemary was convinced the 3 things were connected.
Within days after the vaccination, William was suffering from diarrhoea 10 times a day, which to me as a mother, and especially as William was my second child, was not normal. I knew he had a problem with the gut. I knew that everything had changed after the MMR, but what I didn't know was what the link was.
Could MMR be an explanation for the huge rise in autism? If so, the rise in different countries should match the introduction of MMR. Sure enough, according to Dr. Wakefield, the MMR vaccine had been introduced in the US in the mid-70s, just as autism started to increase. Whilst in the UK, autism started rising in the late 80s, again, just as the MMR vaccine was being introduced. When a child is vaccinated, a small amount of virus is injected into the body. Because the virus has been weakened, the body's immune system easily defeats it, leaving the child protected. But Wakefield suspected that by giving 3 different viruses, the immune system was being overwhelmed. Instead of being defeated, the measles virus from the vaccine remains in the body. Wakefield's theory was that the measles virus causes a persistent infection of the gut, leading to bowel disease. This bowel disease stops the gut from digesting food properly, creating toxic chemicals called opioids. These opioids then enter the bloodstream and make their way to the brain, where they damage the developing brain, causing autism. It was a bold and controversial theory.
Epidemiology is the study of the health of populations. Huge populations. And really requires measuring events that happen to lots of people in order to try and work out what are the causes of ill health.
Dr. Wakefield had claimed that the rise in autism had started at about the time MMR was introduced. So epidemiologists looked more closely to see if the data really matched up. The story turned out to be much more complicated.
The rise occurred before MMR was introduced. It continued after MMR was introduced, even though the uptake rate of MMR was constant. The rates at which autism was being diagnosed were increasing.
And in Japan, the MMR vaccine was withdrawn in 1993. But a recent study has shown that autism rates there have still risen. So the evidence suggests that MMR wasn't responsible for the epidemic, but that still didn't prove that it was safe. To really find out whether MMR increases the risk of autism, scientists needed a way of comparing children who did have the vaccine with children who didn't. And in one country, just such a study was possible. In Denmark, every child is given a unique social security number on the day they are born. This number is used to record every medical event in their history. So researchers pulled out the data for every child in Denmark born between 1991 and 1998. More than 500,000 children. Although the majority of Danish children do receive the vaccine, there were almost 100,000 children who hadn't. So scientists could compare the rate of autism in those two groups. And they found that the rate was the same, whether they'd had MMR or not.